All right, gentlemen, we are live and recording.
I'm gonna wait a couple minutes because I know Mr. Dodger was running late. Was not. Wait a little bit. David, how many do we have? How many, we need 8 or 9? Ron said he could.
We need 8 if one person.
Ron can call. Well, he's stuck. Mr. Ron, he said he had a meeting at 6, but here's.
Chris.
No, but
Yeah. Orders. Yeah.
We're waiting on a couple other people to show up. We're short of a quorum, so if it's okay with you folks, we'll wait just a little bit longer before we call the meeting. I'd hate to make all y'all come back if I got folks on the way, so.
do you have background music?
You want to sing?
No.
Come on. Just. A tree. You know, when you're going different places. I want to talk about, I had a guy, yes. He's done. The other one. No. Right. So much for so much. So, yeah, I got. Hey.
Remember that? Oh, yeah. Excuse my lateness.
got it ready.
I know, I was just making sure you weren't the only one.
We were just waiting.
The reply, the email, when I replied to your email, I got a kickback said it had a permanent failure. Here.
Call the February 21st Putnam Planning Commission meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The roll call, please.
Jason Asbury,
Here.
Heather Davis, Jim Dodger,
Here.
Brian Ellis, Jessica Griffith, Dave Hopper, Brian Holman,
Brian.
Vic Mays, David Mills, Jacob Pack,
Here.
Steve Perry,
Here.
Travis Willard, Glenn Yeager,
Here.
and Al Ford.
Alrighty. You guys have the meeting minutes on your tablets, and they were also sent out by staff prior to tonight's meeting. Take a look, take a review. If there's no additional changes, I'll take a motion to approve. I have a motion, have a second? Second, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. All right, next part is citizens' concerns. This is for any concerns that the public would like to bring. It's not going to be covered on our agenda. I'm assuming everybody here's for what's on the agenda, so let the record reflect no citizens' concerns. And with that, we have a public hearing for the Albert Summers Family Trust rezoning. I am going to open the public hearing at this time. Anybody on the board have a disclosure for conflict? I do have a disclosure. I'm going to have to be dismissed for this, and I've asked Mr. Pack, since Mr. Mills is not here, to run this public hearing since he has that experience from being a previous president of the Planning Commission. So, Mr. Pack, it's all yours.
All right, we'll start with the staff presentation.
All right, so this is rezoning 2301. That's the first rezoning application we've had for 2023. Mr. Albert T. Summers submitted it. The parcel in question does not have a 911 address yet. It's identified on tax map 214 as parcel 48.4, located on Liberty Park Drive, if you're going east in Scotts District, okay? The request is to rezone this piece of property from R1, which is what it currently is, single-family residential, to C2, high-density commercial district. If you go down to Section 2, facts that need to be determined, the proposed amendment would protect and promote the public health, safety, convenience, morals, and general welfare. Is the amendment consistent in achieving the objectives of the comprehensive plan, the U.S. Corridor Management Plan, the Tays Valley Land Use Plan? Is the amendment if the amendment is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan, US 35 corridor plan, or the Tays Valley Land Use Plan, has there been any major changes of an economic, physical, or social nature that have substantially altered the basic characteristics of the area? Those documents, those plans are at the president's desk if throughout this process you would like to refer to them, or if you want to ask me any questions, feel free to do so. Number 4 stays the same through every single rezoning state code, so we're not going to dive into that. Same for number 5, authority. I'm going to skip through that. And we'll get to number 6, which is the zoning description. Again, R1 single-family residential. What is the purpose of this zoning? It is the intent of R1 single-family zoning to establish low-density residential areas consisting of single-family dwellings and compatible uses. This district provides for the requirements consistent with community values and needs, standards consistent with those values and needs, and appropriate for a single-family residential district shall, and you got 4 points here. 1, they should stabilize and protect the district's residential character. 2, provide for the access of light and air to windows while providing privacy by controlling the space and height of structures. Require the provision of open space and regulate signs to enhance quality of life. And require the provisions of off-street parking to promote a safe and effective traffic circulation system. So that's what it's currently zoned, R1. What the request is for is Article 650, C2 High Density Commercial District. The purpose of this district is to provide a wide range of commercial uses whose nature of business requires convenient automobile and truck access. Such uses must be accessible to the county as well as the entire region and must be planned in a way to promote and protect commercial working areas. All right, so we're going to get to the facts, and this is where you will be able to reference the attachments that are at the back of your packet. Starting with attachment A, Mr. Summers, Albert T. Summers Family Trust submitted this rezoning application back, I believe it was in December, is what the application shows. Again, it's tax map 214, 48.4. It's a little over 7 acres. Currently zoned R1, and the request is to go to C2 high density commercial. You can see a copy of the proposed, or of the submitted application, along with the disclosure statements reflected in attachment A. Number 2, the applicant is requesting to rezone tax map 214 parcel 48.4, a total of 7.09 acres on Liberty Park Drive. The survey, for what it's worth, is attached. I know it's kind of small, but it is, again, for 7.09 acres located off of Liberty Park Drive. We've also got the legal descriptions that go along with the survey. The applicant submitted the deeds attesting ownership to the properties. Those are listed as attachment C. I think the most phone calls I've received have been in relation to number 4 and I believe number 5 on here. The most common question is, what's it currently zoned? What can they currently do with it? And if it is approved, what could they do with it, right? So that's where Article 400, which is number 4, and Article 650, which is number 5, that's where we would provide this information to the public. You can see those 2 attachments as attachments D and attachments E. Attachment D is the single-family residential article, and you will see a list of permitted principal uses, A through F. This is what I've been providing citizens of Putnam County when they call in. This will show you what they could currently do in the R1 zoning. And then attachment E will show the list of permitted uses for C2. So if it is rezoned, if this is approved, what could they do in a C2 zoned property? That is listed as attachment E under permitted principal uses, okay? I will say that as part of a rezoning, a lot of times people want to know what are they doing or something to that nature. That is not a requirement. When it comes to a rezoning, we're not talking about a specific development or a specific use. If it is rezoned, you have to be okay with any of these uses being developed on that parcel. Okay. Fast forwarding to attachment F. This lot, tax map 214, parcel 48.4, is undeveloped. Let me get to attachment F. A copy of the zoning map and photos of the site are included. Again, reference attachment F. The proposed rezoning is outlined. You will see that in yellow. It's the one highlighted in yellow, outlined in black. The surrounding parcels are as follows. Parcels 33.4 and 48.6. Both are currently zoned R1 single family. They are owned by the West Virginia Department of Transportation and surround the parcel on the north, east, and south sides. Again, you can reference the picture here. I-64 is located directly south of the parcel. Directly on the other side of I-64 is R2 Mixed Residential District. You'll see that housing just south on the map here. West and abutting the subject parcel is C2 high density. You'll see that in red, highlighted there in red on your map. Farther north of the subject parcel exists additional R1 single-family zoning. You'll see that in the light yellow. Parcel 48.4 is not located in FEMA's 100-year floodplain or flood zone. Number 7, it deals with public comments. I have not had anything in writing or emailed sent to me as far as public comments. I have had several phone calls from various citizens. I think most of them actually live in some HOA in this area somewhere. I'm not from that area, so don't make me give you any specifics on the HOA. I'm not super familiar with that, but I believe a lot of the phone calls have come from an HOA. No written comments, no emails, nothing to that effect. Fast forward to the options that we have available to us. The Putnam County Commission may take a variety of actions. 1, should the Planning Commission desire further information regarding this application, the matter may be postponed for action at a later date. So you can table this to a later meeting if you so choose. Option 2, should the Planning Commission find that the application does promote the public health, safety, convenience, moral, and general welfare, and meets the intent of the reference planning documents, then the request can be forwarded to the Putnam County Commission with a recommendation to approve. So if you so choose, you can forward this to the County Commission with an approval recommendation. That's option 2. Option 3, should the Planning Commission find that the application does not promote the public health, safety, convenience, morals, and general welfare, or does not meet the intent of the reference documents, then the request can be forwarded to the County Commission with a recommendation to deny. So option 1, you can table it for a later meeting so we can gather additional information. Option 2, you can forward with a recommendation to the County Commission for approval. Or option 3, you can forward to the County Commission with a recommendation to deny. So with that that's the end of my staff report. If anybody has any questions that you would like me to try to answer, I'll be glad to do that.
I've got one question, just a comment. So, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Mann's home is just pretty much a continuation of what Mr. Summers has already got going down the interstate, which is reserved for C2 as it is. But is there any difference on the backside than any of the other property that he has, or is it just, it's the same, right?
So I didn't hear you that great.
So anything that he would do, the setbacks would have to be the same. And is there anything behind this, Mr. Mann's piece of property that's any different than, what he's already got daisy chaining down through there?
So the reference piece of property right now is R1, those
I
setbacks and
understand
things
what
of that
the-
nature.
I'm asking what's behind it. Is there
It's
anything that we
R1
should
as
know
well.
about?
It's
Okay.
R1's own
Are
property.
there homes right there on it?
No, it is undeveloped as of right now.
That's
Now,
what
if you
it's all-
cross the street and go up a little ways,
Sure,
there's
that's all I
homes.
needed, that's all I was wondering, man. Thank you.
But that doesn't change the fact that it's still R1.
But they'll have to still have the setbacks and the different
Yeah.
things that are set forth by our code.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. Thank you.
I apologize, I couldn't hear you very well over there.
33.4, that is owned by the DOT. So, and that is a wooded area, I'm assuming it's the hillside. How far do you know from there to Waterfront Lane?
Do I know how far that is?
Yes, how large of a piece of property?
I don't know it just off the top of my head. And, I can get that information and get it to you.
It is a wooded area. So I was just thinking about it. But I'm
Judging from plat now, attachment B, it looks to me like parcel 48.6, that's owned by the DOH, already has a road attached to it to access that property that's already paved there. Am I looking at that correctly?
Yeah, there's I call it a stub of a road. It doesn't have not a roundabout, but a cul-de-sac or anything like that at the very end. It's just the very beginnings of it. And if you drive out there, where the entrance to this property would be, it's got some orange barrels and some bars kind of blocking it off where people can't drive up in there. But yes, there is the beginnings of a road there.
Anybody else have any more questions for staff? If there's no more questions for staff, I'd like to give the applicant or developer an opportunity to speak. You just come to the microphone, state your name and address.
My name's TJ Summers, 107 Liberty Square, Hurricane. My father purchased that property in 1987 at bankruptcy. It was Tag Galleon bankruptcy. And back then it was residentially based at the time. And it was his desire, and of course my desire as well, being an agent of the trust, to eventually get that to a C2 commercial property. Dennis Mann's property is currently C2, which is the adjacent abutting property to the west. There's an H1 designation to the east. We face the interstate. You have US 35, which wasn't available back then. You have the Liberty Park Drive, which was not connecting US 34 to US 35. So there's been a multitude of changes over the past several years that have prompted this, and also the fact that it's really the highest and best use of that property is commercial. It's really not residential anymore. So that's really, basically it. I did meet with some of the residents nearby, and they're here this evening, and they were kind enough to ask me to come to their house and meet with them. We discussed certain issues and their concerns, and my takeaway from that meeting was they have concerns about safety and noise and anything that you would expect any residential person to have. I think the distance is way sufficient to the house. There is woods there. There are three homes back there as far as I know, but I think you're maybe a couple hundred feet away, if I'm not mistaken, if not further. So you're way past any buffer normally would be between residential and commercial anyway. And there is a wooded area back there. And I couldn't promise them what would go on there 100%, but I am sensitive to obviously residential people in their homes. And I do appreciate the fact that they sat down to meet with me to go over their concerns, and I'm sure they're going to speak this evening. But I do ask you to recommend it to be C2. Thank you.
Is there any questions for Mr. Summers?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Summers. Okay, well, we've heard from the staff and we've heard from the applicant, developer. There's no one else to speak from your side. And at this point, then we'll open up the floor for public comments. I do ask that you limit your comments to approximately 5 minutes. That sometimes we get emotional about these things, and that's understandable, but just try to be respectful. And you can start by stating your name and your home address for the record. So if anyone would like to speak, please come to the microphone.
Good evening. My name is Gary Barton. I live at 239 Waterfront Lane.
Gary Barton at 239 Waterfront Lane?
Scott Depot.
I was just repeating that, so that way
Right.
you're a little bit quiet, Mr. Barton.
Excuse me. I'm president of the Coon Creek Owners Association. I'd just like to share a little bit of background information with you. And we don't have enough information to be here 100% in support, and we're not here 100% in opposition. We feel like there isn't enough information to make an intelligent decision on this. There are some concerns that we have that just haven't been addressed. Now, upon receipt of tonight's meeting notice, I called a special meeting of the Homeowners Association. The Coon Creek Owners Association is a subdivision of 5 lots, 3 of which have been developed with family homes. Lot sizes range from 3 to 7 acres. 2 undeveloped lots remain at the front of the subdivision. As developer of the subdivision, Tag Gallion Jr. established regulations and restrictions governing the Coon Creek subdivision in December 1980. These were filed with the Putnam County Clerk's Office that month and may be found in Miscellaneous Book 19, page 73. Mr. Gallion's holdings were sold at bankruptcy in 1987. Mr. Al Summers purchased Mr. Gallion's property at the bankruptcy sale for $75,000. This included 28 acres associated with Coon Creek subdivision. The majority of these 28 acres were sold to the state of West Virginia for road construction and runoff water control. Mr. Summers' family trust retains ownership of 12 acres, which include 2 remaining lots that are now being considered for rezoning from R1 to C2. The previously mentioned subdivision regulations and restrictions require that the properties be used only for residential purposes. These regulations were set for a 25-year term with changes only allowed during the 6 months prior or 6 months following the 25-year anniversary of the regulations. Any change would require a 2/3 approval by association members at that time. The regulations and restrictions automatically renew and will next be available for change during 2030. Each of the 3 families who are now residents have been residents of the subdivision for a period of 7 years or less. While we would prefer residential development, we were in agreement that we should be open-minded in approaching this rezoning request with a focus on what is best for the quality of life in Putnam County. We invited TJ to our association meeting, which he attended last Thursday evening. He stated that he had received an increased number of calls concerning his property for sale following the Target announcement. TJ mentioned that he had received inquiries from hotel owners and later mentioned Harley Davidson had called. He stated that he had not made a decision about the sale of his property. Yesterday, I consulted with a real estate attorney in Charleston because our association has some very serious concerns that we believe would best be addressed prior to a new owner becoming involved. Now, I have with me a copy of both Al Summers' original deed and also a copy of the Summer Family Trust deed, as I noticed you were given one. Both deeds state that, quote, "This covenant is subject to that certain declaration of covenants, conditions, reservations, and easements for all sections of Coon Creek subdivision," end of quote. The deed provided to a new owner would carry these same conditions, which would negatively impact any title search made by a lending institution. TJ did reply to a question in our meeting that he would like to get $500,000 per acre for the rezoned property. We asked that the requested zoning change from R1 to C2 be tabled until Mr. Summers determines to whom he is selling his family's property. We further request that from TJ, the opportunity to meet and discuss with the buyer their plans for development of the property. We will work with them to quickly develop a written agreement so that all parties' rights are protected. In return for this consideration, we will work with Mr. Summers to have the property which he wants rezoned removed from the Coon Creek subdivision. This would free the property from the subdivision's covenants and restrictions immediately, and it would also allow the issuance of a deed without restrictions. The reason we asked Mr. Summers what he had hoped to receive in the way of price for his property, my wife and I, in order to avoid my limited ability to speak publicly, had considered not renewing a CD and offering him over 10 times the amount of the appraised value of the 12 acres he holds in our subdivision. We didn't bother to make that offer after we heard he wanted $500,000 an acre, because instead of 12 acres, we would have bought just under a half acre. So we don't want to suggest anything to hurt Mr. Summers or his ability to develop the property. We welcome any number of possible commercial uses that do not offer problems within our small country lifestyle. We paid extra for our properties because the homes are situated on lots unlike what you would have in a conventional subdivision. It's nice, except when the deer eat all your plants. But again, I would only request that you consider waiting until there is a purchaser, and we'll work to get a clean deed to present to that new purchaser. Thank you.
You'd like to speak on the microphone? Just start with your name and address, please.
Sure. My name is James Wiltz. I live at 194 Waterfront Lane in the Coon Creek subdivision. First, thanks for having us here, and first and foremost, we're pro-business, all right? That's one of the reasons my wife and I moved back to West Virginia after living out of state. We're from West Virginia and wanted to move back, and obviously we knew when we bought the house where Liberty Square is. It's the proximity to obviously a lot of TJ's property and Panera Bread and all that good stuff. We also bought it with the assumption that this was R1 and under the Coon Creek restrictions, right? So some of the concerns, like Gary said, is proximity to our house. Can I ask? Are we able to ask questions here as well? So the yellow is an entire lot of 12 acres, right? And then for lack of a better term, the dotted line, that's the actual elevated portion, correct? Okay, just make sure. So proximity to our house and to the point of the board, I understand and to TJ, the where it is, because I can see it from my house when the leaves are off. So proximity to house, resale value, beauty of the development, and really, I would say noise. If it is C2, you know, I forgot your name, my apologies. It could be, you have to be open to everything, right? And I understand that. If you say C2, it can put whatever's on there. So, you know, one of the questions I would have for TJ or whoever in here, why that specific lot? There are other lots besides, obviously, the hotel. Forgive me for not knowing the exact parcel names. Besides the hotel, that entire land right there to build, and I would support that 110%. This particular lot, I would say, parcel 48.4, as Gary mentioned, is inside the Coon Creek subdivision and is under the Coon Creek restrictions, single-family residential, which obviously is the point of why we're meeting today. We could work with the developer of this property to modify the restrictions to benefit from C1 zoning. Our predecessors of the property, this is not the first meeting of this property. There's been many others, if you look at the records, have suggested. Actually, our Mr. Lilly, Pete Lilly, was actually in favor of potentially rezoning, but to C1. I think that does fit more. It was more compatible with single-family residential. So our recommendation. Yes, we'd like to see it R1, but we are realistic, is to rezone it for C1, like I said, that is more compatible with single-family residential. And we do have, if the board would like copies of that, copies of emails dating back. Yes, go ahead.
Let me speak to that before we continue
Sure.
on. From what I'm looking at the map, I don't see where there's C1 property abutting this property. And we're under a certain rules where we can't do what's called spot zoning.
Sure.
We can't select specific property and just make it a certain. So at this point, this board would either be able to recommend that it stay R1 or go C2. We don't have the option to do C2.
Okay, that's fair. Appreciate that. So abutting the property, the WVDOT that's you mentioned is still, yes, it is owned by West Virginia Department of Transportation, but it is R1 and all abutting all the way north. The question was raised where I believe by Mr. Yeager about where are other parts, where are other residential around that. So there's residential north and all I would say northeast is my property. And then we have, I believe H1. So yes, there is residential all surrounding this. However, I understand the C2 adjacent to Liberty Park. You know, I would say the highest and best use, and again, we are for the development of West Virginia 100%, just not, I would say, this particular lot, or this parcel, I should say. The highest and best use, I would say, is open to interpretation. Whose highest and best use? Is it the highest and best use of the landowner? Is the highest and best use of the county? I would say that's obviously open to interpretation. I'll close with this. Given that there are many acres besides the hotel that are available as already C2 and could be developed right now, that would be our recommendation for whatever is coming there. Any questions? Yes.
Looking at the Google Earth, can you tell me Is it one of you folks that has the first house
First house is mine.
on the little lake with the little boat dock?
Yes, yes, sir.
And then you have the two other houses on up that are further northwest of you?
That's correct. So just to clarify, we represent, I guess, 66% of the population here tonight. The other two homeowners were not able to be here.
And so the lot, or the parcel that's across waterfront from your property, which is parcel 48, is that one of the lots you're describing that's not been yet developed?
I believe the parcel beside, directly across from me would be owned by, I don't know the exact, but owned by TJ, I believe.
That's not part of the subdivision?
It is part of the subdivision across from me, yes.
All right,
That's not developed in a wooded area.
okay, that's what I was, all right, thanks.
Yep. Any other questions?
How long have you lived at this location?
October 2020.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Anyone else from the public want to speak? Please come and state your name and address.
Ann Wilt, 194 Waterfront Lane.
I'm sorry, can you repeat your name again?
Ann, A-N-N-E, Wilt.
Get that. Thank you.
I'm less technical probably than Gary and James, but I echo their sentiments. In regard to this piece of property, there's all these documents and agreements that the HOA's made and outlining the zoning for the purpose of protecting and preserving the safety and integrity in our neighborhood. This area in our state is growing rapidly, and it's really exciting to see all the new stuff that's coming in, but it's also growing more and more homogeneous. You have houses and businesses, houses with no outlets, businesses. It's all the same everywhere. We've lived here for 10 years, and we lived in that for a while, and it was fine. But we found this little piece of heaven here in this busy, busy place, tucked away, without roads in and out, without big businesses right there. And I really think that maintaining the residential zoning will help preserve the unique quality of the place that we live. We have small children. We can hear the interstate, so I really have a hard time believing that a big business, C2, dense commercial, we're not going to hear that. I really have trouble believing that. You asked what's just north of this property. The answer is our house. So I worry about our personal investment and our quality of life. While leaving it residential, there's still a lot of space, interstate-facing property for business development, and I do support that. Like James said, highest and best use is subjective. Based on your definition for R1 zoning, some words that I picked out: maintaining character, privacy, quality of life, safety. Those are things that are important to me, important to our family, important to our neighborhood. And then your description, your legal description for C2 included commercial uses with auto and truck access. So, what does that look like? Does that mean delivery trucks coming right in our area? What are we going to see? What are we going to hear? Right now, it's pretty quiet, minus the interstate, which we can hear. So my main concerns are for safety, noise, property resale value, future encroachment on our property, and so on. So first of all, maintaining our safety, security of our family, protecting our investment and our lifestyle. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? At this point, then, I'll close the public hearing portion and open it up for staff discussion.
Mr. Summers? Yes. How long has the Liberty Park Drive been there?
I'd say 7 years, something like that.
Okay,
If I had to guess.
all right. And it does hook to the new Route 35.
Yes.
So basically, the new Liberty Park hooks Route 35 and Route 34 together.
Correct.
Yes. Okay, that's all. Thank
I have another question. Mr. Summers, you know the lot that I was referring to just a minute ago that's across Waterfront Lane from this gentleman's property? Let's see it on here, I'm sorry. Yeah, come on. This lot right here. State Road owns all this. This one over here. Right, I understand.
You
But
talking about 33.4?
Actually, they're labeled the same, 21448 is on both sides. And then, you also own this property, 45.1 Woodscape? Okay, all right, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Mr. Dodrell, I have a question. I've been hearing all kinds of talk about homeowners association and the covenants that are involved in that. How does that affect us as a board?
It's been a minute since I've practiced real estate law. It's my understanding that if this is rezone C2, it's no longer subject to the covenant, the restricted covenants.
Mr. Summers?
You would be basically excised out.
Sorry. You actually want the yellow portion of this,
Water area.
if you don't mind, right there, that's the piece. You also own this piece and this piece. Okay, so you want the yellow piece and not the two pieces in?
We would never do this.
No.
That's
That's,
just this piece here. This is the wooded area. This would only be development of flat.
yes. And so, yes, absolutely would not develop those.
Right, those would stay right.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
It's also my understanding that if it were Zone C2, that any type of application that comes in there would have to fit under said guidelines and is appealable?
So the rezoning, if it is approved or if it is denied, the rezoning up to 30 days after,
No, what I'm saying is if it was taken to C2,
okay?
any type of application that were to come in, because we as a board can't dictate, we never know what people are going to do with the property. We can't-
Yes, that's correct.
We can't ask them to put, we can't really ask, we don't know what the business is. All we know is where it's located, what it's near, and then take in account the human factor. But my question is, if it's zone C2 and it's gone ahead, then any application that would come after that would have to be approved, would have to fit the criteria, and any of it could be appealable. Isn't that correct?
Everything's correct with the exception of appealable.
Really? 'Cause
If
I had a
it
pretty good
is zone
discussion about that today.
C2, if it's zone C2 and it's approved and we're past the 30-day appeal period, once the rezoning is finalized, anything that is C2 listed under the permitted uses, as long as it meets those guidelines,
Then if it meets those guidelines, it is not appealable?
yes, that's correct. So, look
It
at
would
the
have to be
list.
It would have to be a named primary function of that C2, right?
Yeah, so the list of permitted principal uses. There's also, I believe, a list on there for special permit uses. So
But that's something that has to be applied
that
for.
would be something that there could be a public voice, a public input during that approval process. But if you're looking at the list of strictly permitted principal uses, if they come in with a commercial permit application and they meet all of our building permit guidelines and criteria, we would be obligated to issue a building permit as long as the use fell under the list of principal permitted uses.
Part of those building permit obligations, I should say, or guidelines, whenever C2 abuts R1 property, there's certain setbacks and certain fencing. and
Yeah,
all those
there's,
things.
we call it screening.
Screening, correct.
So there's screening requirements. There's always, regardless of the zoning, setback requirements as well. So the screening, the buffering, whatever you want to call it, as well as the setbacks will differ depending on the zoning. R1 setbacks, for example, what it's currently zoned, typically are a little bit smaller and closer together than something like a commercial project would be. The screening is also typically for an R1 less strict, less intense, right? The screening for R1s. It gets more intense the higher you go, right? So screening for a commercial property abutting a residential would be a little more intense.
So my point is that if we recommended for it to be approved for the change, once development takes place, there already is certain protections for some of these concerns that are already in the ordinance.
So they'll submit a building permit application, and Ms. Sargent here, she does all of our commercial reviews. Her and David will review it to make sure it aligns not just with our screening guidelines, but with all of our commercial guidelines. And if there's, typically the way it works, they can speak for the process, but if there's anything that is submitted that conflicts with the codes as they are, they'll put notes together and ask the applicant to submit revisions. Long story short, we don't issue a building permit unless they align with our guidelines. There is another process that they can go through. It's called a variance request through the BZA. So if the applicant is just, dead set on doing something that goes against our commercial guidelines, for example, screening, right? If he wants to have a little less intense screening, he can go through what's known as the BZA, the Board of Zoning Adjustments, get a variance request, or he can apply for a variance request, and then it would be up to the BZA to grant that variance, right? But that process would be full of public input. There'd be plenty of notice. Public have plenty of comment time as well. So it would not be done in a vacuum. But without that variance, they would definitely have to align with all of our codes.
Harley dealership.
I don't have it listed in front of me. And honestly, just to stay fair to the applicant and to stay aligned with the process, it's really not, it's not fair to the applicant to have a discussion about a specific use.
Correct.
It's his right to ask for a rezoning, and it's my responsibility to tell you that if you grant this rezoning, anything listed under those permitted uses, principal permitted uses, could and would be approved if he aligned with all of our codes.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Summers, but I heard one resident suggest that we wait until you've decided who is going to purchase your property before we move on this. And the way I see that, you can speak on this if you think, but I feel like that it would be very difficult to sell the property unless it was zoned for the
C2.
use that the company was already looking on. Am I correct about that?
Yes, and I don't think there'd be an issue if there was a user for it. If I could get them together with the residents, if they wanted to discuss some things, but it's just the landowner, whether it's a specific user who has interest now or that goes away and somebody else, I can't dictate and know exactly who's going to be on it. I'd be happy to introduce them together and see what could be done, certainly.
What I'm getting at is it'd be very difficult to market your
Oh,
property
yes.
as a C2 property if it's not already zoned that way.
Yes.
Is that right?
Right, and I can't see ever putting a house on there. I mean, it's residential, so it'd be commercial, really. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have any more questions or discussion?
Jonathan,
Go ahead.
is the 30-day appeal process from our decision or from the county commission?
It's from the date so the county commission will make a decision.
County commission.
And then we have some behind the scenes paperwork, paper pushing is what I call it, where people have to sign the orders and all that good stuff. So it's 30 days from when I actually get that order recorded, right? So it's not even technically 30 days from their decision. It's how fast can staff get the paperwork together, get it to the county clerk, get it recorded, 30 days from that day.
You guys are ready, we'll go ahead and move to our worksheet. You all agree with that?
I'd like to ask Mr. Wilson
Sure, go
a
ahead.
question. Does Waterfront Lane, is it a dead end or did it exit out the backside?
It is a dead-end private road. Correct.
Thank you.
Yep.
Do you have any other questions?
No, sir.
No, that's fine, that's what we're here for. All right, well, let's move to our worksheet. It says facts that need to be determined for rezoning. Relevant facts, criteria number 1, will the proposed amendment protect and promote the public health, safety, convenience, moral, and general welfare? Would anyone like to offer an opinion on number 1?
I would like to say yes, that it would, because the piece of property is a far more valuable piece of property, commercial piece, now that the connecting road has been, built between 34 and 35. The DOH boundary, buffer zone, but yes, it would benefit the state and community. Zone C2.
Anyone else? Anything else to offer? Or would you like to make that in motion, that number 1 would be yes? Yes. We have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Oops, I can't vote, sorry. All opposed, say nay. So number 1 is a yes. Number 2, is the amendment consistent with the adopted comprehensive plan and US 35 corridor management plan? Would anyone like to speak to that?
I'll speak to it. I think that it definitely does, because they have reserved C2 properties to be up near the interstate interchanges and by the interstate. It looks to me like on the map that when it comes into the curve, there's a wooded lot that'll never be developed. But I think it's consistent.
Would you like to make that in a
I'll make that motion.
We have a second?
Chairman, I just want to add, if you allow me,
Sure.
to both the answers for number 1 and number 2. As this board knows, I've been typically very protective of residential areas, and I looked at this one, and I've been up in this area. I support both answers to these, and I want to make sure, add that the reason I think it's the highest and best use, and that hopefully the citizens and residents of this area would be protected is the natural screening and buffer zones that already exist up there, both on Mr. Summers' side of the property line and on the DOH's side of the property line. There's a significant area of natural buffer and screening that's already there that probably is more than what would ever be required by someone who makes an application, gives a building permit application. And obviously them being surrounded on 3 sides by DOH-owned property, I think that there's little likelihood of interference or disruption of the residential folks that are enjoying that, to enjoy their property. By the way this property is already laid out and the way it's already been cleared in the buffer zone.
Thank you for your comment, Mr. Dodrell. And for the record, Mr. Perry had seconded the motion. So we do have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. And opposed? Okay, seeing as how we have answered both number 1 and number 2 of the relevant facts as a yes, I'll entertain a motion to accept Mr. Summers' application for submittal to the Kanawha County Commission as approved.
We'll do it to the button.
Recommended to be approved. Thank you. Mr. Perry makes that motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Yeager makes a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Opposed? Okay, it passes then. At this point, I'm going to leave the table and go get Mr. Asbury from the hall. And I'll relinquish the chair back to Mr. Asbury.
Thank you, Mr. Pack. You folks are obviously more than welcome to stay for the remainder of our meeting. If you have other things you'd rather go do, you're also welcome to leave. We appreciate your time. All right, next on our agenda, unfinished business. Mr. Call or Jonathan, anything from there? I don't have any on my list.
I do not have any unfinished business. Mr. Cole, I'm going to get out of the way.
No, it's fine. Any unfinished business on your end?
Oh, no, I was here for the permit status report.
Okay. Go ahead. Well, I don't have any new business. If anybody on the board has any old or unfinished or new, please go ahead. If not, Mr. Call, staff report.
Okay, you'll see on your iPads, it's titled January Report. Excuse me. These are the permits that were applied for in January. See the permit number and the name and the project type, the approval date, and any type of comments out to the right. Next.
Mr., real quick, one question. Do we have any permits that have been applied for prior to January that have not been approved?
You'll see at the very top of that sheet, the Camping World is still on hold per the client's request. The stream repair, the Rock Branch stream repair that the county commission is working with the WVCA on, we're still awaiting data from the WVCA in order to finalize that and to get that going. The cart mill, you see we're waiting on engineering revisions relative to floodplain compliance. The Blevins commercial on Tays Valley Road, we are waiting on revisions relative to drainage information.
David, let me interrupt you there for a minute, buddy. What I don't see on this report is any dates of any of the movement that's gone on, meaning we know that certain things are on hold and that we're waiting on information, but what we don't see is the last time we've been in contact with them, how long we've been waiting for that, or any of that relevant information.
Okay. So we would add a column for last contact.
I think that would satisfy me with that. That's
Rel-
the rest of the board to have input on that, of course.
Okay.
We can do that. Do we have an ETA on the WVCA?
That would be great. They're great. They're covered up. They've been working on big projects.
And is this a private project or a government county project?
It's a collaboration between the county commission and the
Okay.
WVCA.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the first one, the pilot project where the two bodies work together for stream reclamation. Unfortunately, the WVCA is that they're strapped, they're understaffed, and they've got larger projects which are gobbling up their priority and resources. Yeah, I'm trying to get that going. We've got to get a bid conference date there for the site so we can have a pre-bid conference with contractors who are interested in the work. And then we've got to put it to bid. And we're still waiting on some data from WVCA relative to the work. I've got, anytime any of you want to see what's going on with that, I've got a huge file. Just let me know and I'll hook you up with anything you want to know about that one. But yeah, we'll add so if we add a column for last contact, and that way you'll be able to see our best efforts to rectify these ones that are open, correct?
Yeah, correct. And I mean, I think too, you know, some of these, I mean, obviously, we don't know the background, but the ones that are, you know, you've got the Cartmill, Blevins, and Meeks, you know, I think it's worth you reaching out to the applicant and just, you know, hey, just, you know, following up, checking in. You guys have any questions? There's anything outstanding that we can help you with here from staff to help you with these revisions?
Sure.
What's that? Yeah.
Okay, and the rest of this document is everything that's been submitted, was submitted in January. So, then the next document on the iPad is sheet number 2. And these are the development permits that were approved for January. Yeah, you see there's 1 site built, 5 manufactured homes, 11 commercial projects, and 1 other, which is a total of 18, and zoning permits, change of land use, and sign. And then on the next page is development plats, 3 administrative or minor, as we're calling them now, 3 boundary changes, 4 merger plats, 2 deed plats, 1 plat to plat, for a total of 13 plats in January.
Yeah.
This is unrelated to your report, but I just thought about it. Earlier in the month, for the last couple of years, in the parking lot over by the Tays Valley Christian School, there were a couple of donation canisters, for lack of a better way of describing those. And they had, over the years, been broken into many times and had basically become a public dump where folks were just dumping stuff outside of the containers to where garbage was spread up Route 34 and in the Christian School's parking lot and the Save-A-Lot parking lot. I got a hold of David about that this month, and he spent a couple of days really trying to track down and going a lot of places to where those were, and I'm happy to report that they're both gone now and cleaned up. It's been the first time in a couple of years I've been able to walk my kid to school and not worry about him stepping on broken glass and all that stuff, so I just want to commend you for your hard work on that.
Thank you.
And we, right now, another public hearing next month, correct, for zoning?
Yes.
Ordinance revision?
March 21, for a text amendment.
Okay. With that, if this board has nothing else, I will take a motion for adjournment.
Motion.
Adjourned.
Thanks, Brian.
David, next month.
See you, bud.